Hey, everybody, welcome back to your Dawn of Autonomy podcast. I'm Dawn Zoldi, your host, CEO of P3 Tech Consulting, and publisher at Autonomy Global. It is May, and we are kicking off Defense Tech Month with our sponsor, Volatus Aerospace. And we've got a wonderful friend to the show, Danielle Gagne, back on the show to talk about all the new developments out there in the Volatusphere. And perfect background you've got there because you have created a global ecosystem for defense and commercial, this dual use. So, really excited to get all the updates today, Danielle. Thanks so much for being on the show.
It's a pleasure to be here, Don. Always a pleasure.
Awesome, awesome. Well, Danielle, before we dive into all the specifics, and I know we're going to dive very deeply into counter UAS specifically, so much has happened over the years. I mean, I just remember back to year one, and Volatus was one of our very first guests. I think every single month you guys sponsored a company to be on the show. And you've grown and changed over the years. I believe we have a little video in terms of your defense markets, offerings. Walk us through.
Yeah, I mean, we're changing so rapidly. Even when I'm looking at this, the change is significant. The amount of changes and augmentation that's been happening with our program. You see here, we're looking at long endurance, medium altitude, long range drones, and we're developing those and manufacturing them in Mirabel. We're continuing to work with our partners, looking at high altitude capabilities, long range, as well as those shorter range, which is what we've been mostly working in. I think this fits in that middle range where you're not flying super long term and high altitude, but this gives you that that sweet spot in the middle there. So here you're seeing a lot of our partners, IdeaForge. We continue to work with and have a great partnership.
Yeah, they're amazing out of India. I've seen
Yeah,
them so many times, and I love that you
yeah.
guys are partnering with them. And now you've got little tactical, looks
Little
like.
tactical drones, yes. UAV tech and a number of other drones that we're building out. These are really helpful to be able to pull out of your pocket. We continue to work with Spirit and the Ascent Aerospace, especially because they're NDAA. So, with everything going on in DJI, we continue to look at those Blue UAS
Yeah.
systems. So,
And this one's so unique that the single axle. I mean, so when you think about an ecosystem of defense drones, you got, oh, look at this giant one.
that's our con that's the Condor. It's a very large drone. I could actually fit inside it if there was space for me. It's for
Wow.
cargo. And it's for bringing a lot of this is dual use, truly dual use. You can deliver on the battlefield, or you can deliver to any place that you need to do heavy lift. And then we have our operations control center, which runs it all. We can run all of our operations remotely from our location in Vaughan. We have about 21 seats for our pilots, and this is a secure facility.
Wow. Holy shnikes. And you didn't even have counter UAS in there. And that's what we're going to be talking about. But, just to kind of see everything else that's going out there, because, Danielle, I know you've heard me say this, counter UAS is the yin to UAS, UAS is yang, if you will.
Yep.
And nowhere is that more, I think, apparent than on the battlefield. So how did counter UAS become part of and training for it in particular? Because I know that's a big part of your new portfolio there at Volatus. How did all that become part of your story?
I think it's always been part of our story, as you just said. It's always been the yin to the yang. It's just goes by a different name, airspace awareness. We've been talking about that from day one. There's always going to be the unaware, the careless, and the dangerous. Without detection and proper mitigation strategies, you can't have a safe airspace, period. But with that said, the demand for counter UAS as a means of protection of civilian populations, assets, et cetera, has become really clear. due to current global events in Ukraine, Iran, and beyond. And even today, you're seeing drones going into prisons, you're seeing drones flying into event scenarios. All of this is starting to come to a head. So they've become cheaper to build. Drones have become cheaper to build, easier to deploy, and a lot more autonomous. And this is for better and for worse. So we want to educate and enable NATO organizations to effectively address these threats.
Okay, very good. And Danielle, remind me, you used to be in the US. Are you sitting physically overseas right now? Or like where are you personally operating out of? Other than
Well,
space that you're behind you.
other than in the airspace, yeah, I'm located in Maine right now, but I'm actually relocating to Montreal this summer.
Oh, how exciting. All right.
Yeah.
So, Volatus has those, the Canadian roots and also as you've grown over the years, all these connections globally. So I know you just mentioned NATO, and I know that's, those partner companies have been a huge focus. And so this training now, let's talk about training because this is part of your focus personally and professionally at Volatus. How did kind of training for counter drone operations evolve then? Because I remember, I think it was our last session, possibly, we talked about the search and rescue training that you guys do for public safety. I mean, you have online training. You and I have talked about training many, many times, but now you
Yeah.
have this counter UAS training. Tell me more about that.
Sure. So we've taken a major we've taken the tack that every single person on the command chain needs to be trained and need to understand, but at different ways and in different places. So we have tiered programs for everyone along that command chain. So we start at the executive level who need to understand the policy and the risks involved in counter UAS. And then the planners who are building out the operational concepts to frontline operators who really need to have that hands-on proficiency. They need to, so at the executive level, again, we're focusing on policy, risk management, decision-making frameworks, and then so that they understand what they're authorizing and
Mm-hmm.
what the implications are to people in the air and on the ground. At the planner level, it is about that concept development. It's about threat assessment of the region and the areas that you're working in, and it's about coordination across teams because this is definitely a team sport when you're working in this. At the operator level, it is hands-on skills. So being able to detect, identify, know how to respond, and working within the rules of engagement. So depending on where you're at, what those engagement rules are for their specific environment, and then being able to do it in stressful cases. So understanding the stress that's involved when you're doing counter UAS. So the full training program really covers the entire chain of command. It's not just for the operators, but for everyone along that command chain.
Excellent, excellent. I mean, training is near and dear to my heart, especially as someone who used to be in the Air Force and, used to advise commanders on rules of engagement, term you used, ROE. It's critically important. So, to use the lawyer term, it depends, right, Danielle? Like what specific training bits and pieces play depending on where that operation is going to occur. Do you guys tailor your training, for a specific region or specific operation, or can you? Because it really, there are some, I think, going back to your slide, there are some foundational concepts that are probably universal, but when it comes to the nuts and bolts, there's probably nuances that must be addressed. So do you guys customize? Do you guys vary this training over time?
We do. We're constantly learning as well. So every single time that something happens within the defense world, we take that learning and blend that back in. But every single person that comes to us, most of this is only an in-person course. There are a couple online courses that give you your strategy and your methodologies, but then in person is really where the boots hit the ground, where you talk to groups about what their specific scenarios are going to be, and also how to rapidly adapt to new situations because you're going to be sent to multiple different regions. How do you handle that kind of rapid flexibility? So we're constantly teaching them how to think about thinking. So there's a little bit of meta in there, but also understanding each unique scenario as they're going in. So we're also teaching them how to evaluate the scenarios that they're going into. So we give them different scenarios to walk through. There's like, okay, this is an incursion here. This is the potential of where it would do. How would you respond to that? So you get them thinking critically about how they're going to respond versus just versus just telling them what to do. We teach them how to think about what they need to do.
Yeah, I mean, that's really key, right? Because
Yeah.
you said under pressure, no situation is the same. To be able to have those kind of, as you call them, meta skills, to be able to make quick decisions is really, really key. So just as a practical matter, Danielle, you said much of this is in person. Who's it really geared towards, right? Because as I listen to you and I think about this, we just did some coverage of the Safer Skies Act, right here in the U.S. for public safety now. Theoretically has counter UAS authority, but you know the FBI and DHS have a pretty close hold on the training for that at the Red Arsenal down there. I think in is it in Arkansas? It doesn't matter. They have a facility and they're pushing people through there. So are we talking mostly in Canada, Europe, globally, or are you also doing some of this in the US? Like, where are these trainings happening?
So they're available to everyone because we are doing it as we're making sure that it is geared and specifically made for the organization that we go to. We can go anywhere in the world to train. We just got back from Jamaica actually training
Wow.
about defense uh, response for natural disasters. So what we do is we go anywhere and anywhere because the threats go anywhere.
That's true.
And even if you're Canadian, you might have to go overseas and work in other global environments. So we're available anywhere. We consult with any group, but we also, and I know this is all about defense, but we're also doing the civilian side because police officers, people who own critical assets, they also need training. They also need to understand what's within their purview to do and what they can and can't do. In fact, we're starting in Canada with a counter UAS workshop, what's legal, and we're talking specifically about the changes in some of the laws in Canada, and then we hope to move to the US to do a similar thing. But we're working on those workshops to teach people what can they do, how can they address these threats in Canada, what's going on in that space, and then we'll move out to there.
That's awesome. And by the way, I just got a big smile on my face because our good friend Danielle McLean from High Sky is out there. She's so happy to catch us live. Good to see you, Danielle. Thanks for joining in. And everybody else out there, we are live. So chime in, say hello, ask questions. I mean, this training is critically important, right, Danielle? Because in fact, I just edited an article, spoiler alert, coming out on Autonomy Global by our training and education ambassador and good friend, Bronwyn Morgan, about this gap between certification and competency. And, you know, just buying a drone or a counter drone system and even getting certified on it doesn't necessarily make you competent to use it. So I love that you're filling this gap and you've acknowledged that. And so along those lines, when, you know, the Jamaican defense community or anybody in the, you know, military unit comes to you, they come to Volatus and they say, hey, we have a counter UAS issue. What does that problem actually look like in your assessment? Like, what have you seen over time?
What we're seeing is that they know the threat is real.
Mhm.
They may or may not have hardware. They might have went out and purchased something that they saw
Yeah,
and in place, but they're not really ready yet to work on what a response actually looks like, what they can actually do in their specific environment. They don't know where to place the technology. They don't know how to formulate a response. And a lot of what goes into counter UAS is the pre-work. You got to get the pre-authorizations. You have to have these responses kind of drilled in so that when you're in a stressful situation, you actually have to act. You can act with confidence that you're doing something that within the legal limits of what your counter UAS program can do. So they don't have documented procedures. They're not trained, and they don't know how to coordinate with other members and other interdepartments. They need to run through scenarios. They need to test, and so that's where we come in and we try to bring the training to provide the scaffolding for what they've already have and what they're trying to learn.
Well, it's, what they already have, right? So you're talking about defense and military units typically, like security is generally their bailiwick, so why do you think it's been so hard for some of them to prepare compared to other security threats they face every day?
That's a great question. I think it's because the threat is constantly evolving and it's changed so rapidly that the drones that were coming in before, they maybe pose less of a threat, but since Ukraine, it's been kind of like a testing ground. Things 2 years ago are different, or even 3 months ago are different today, and the tactics and systems are changing even faster. It's kind of like cybersecurity right now, right?
Yeah, it's like, especially with AI. I mean, I was just at GUINT and they're talking about identity, right? And security, identity and authentication just on a computer in the workplace. But they're like, oh yeah, AI agents have their own identities and we have to cage them too. I'm like, wait, what? So, I mean, just trying to keep up with these nuances and these threats is really, really hard. So we have a great question from the audience, and it's Mark Stainbrook asked this, and actually, Mark, I was just going to ask, what do your programs include? So Danielle, I'm going to ask that, and then I'm going to add Mark's question to that. What do they include? And are you addressing wire-guided drones as part of it?
We are certainly, we're addressing any emerging threat as part of it. So our courses include everything that's coming into play. So this is a rapidly evolving, again, that's the reason why we're in person and we're constantly adapting what's going on. What it includes is not only the, like I was talking about, the thought structure or the scenario structures that help you think strategically about how to do counter UAS. It also includes access to our SKYDRA simulator, which I'm sure we'll be talking about shortly, where you can actually play out real scenarios using red and blue teaming to test what you're going to do, test it in the field, get a feel for what you're doing. So you also include those kinds of scenarios so you can work in kind of a sandbox to play out what your thoughts are so that you can see where that end game is and where the probabilities are and where the vulnerabilities are.
Yeah, absolutely. That thought process you've been talking about, Danielle, in the Air Force, we called it the OODA loop, or observe, orient, decide, and act. And kind of drilling that OODA thought process into, your operations is really key. And it sounds like that's what you're doing. And, to your point, you can't always have live training where you're taking things out of the sky. We know how difficult that is, whether it's in the US, Canada, probably even in Europe, unless you're actually on the front lines and the Ukrainians are live testing your stuff, which they do, which is awesome. This idea of a simulator is critical. And in fact, right, we've seen not just the FAA, but other, I'll call them civil aviation authorities, adopting simulation training more and more for pilots, for other purposes. The powered lift, SFAR, Special Federal Aviation Regulation, comes to mind for the eVTOL aircraft. So let's talk more about SKYDRA, because I feel like this is super important. And so Anyway, I'm sorry, I'm squirreling because comments are coming in and I love it.
Yeah.
Mark is saying that he's sending their folks to the federal counter drone training. So good for you, Mark. That's awesome. And they recently joined a federal counter drone task force. So very cool.
Very
So
cool.
Danielle, let me deviate then for 1 second before we get to SKYDRA in your simulator. Uh,
Yeah.
for someone like Mark, right, who is
Mhm.
going through the federal training, you said you have online components and other things. Like, would it still be valuable for Mark and his team to check out your website and see some of the things you have out there as they prepare to head over to that federal training or even afterwards?
Yeah, absolutely. Especially if you're noticing gaps or have something that you want to fill in, we can certainly bring that additional layer to your training experience. Uh, Again, we have the SKYDRA, so if there are things that you want to try out and actually get some practical exercises in, that's also something that we can support with. So definitely worth looking at our defense page and seeing where we can potentially slot in. And we'd be happy to have a conversation about what that might look like as well. We're currently capturing consulting. There's a consulting form that I would recommend you go through.
All right, awesome. Because honestly, Danielle, I've been looking around and I haven't seen a lot of, let's call it, counter UAS training out there. Because I think at least in the United States, it's because people are like, well, we don't have the authority. Why do we need the training? It's like, well, some people have it now. And even if you don't, you probably still should be educated because it's part of your entire ecosystem. If you're flying beyond visual line of sight, you have UAS traffic management, airspace awareness, to use your term. And frankly, that's a term that my buddy Tom Adams keeps using, right? He's now with
Yeah.
Drone Shield, but former FBI counter drone guy. Uh, we all share the same airspace, and it's so critically important to know
Yeah.
what's out there. So let's talk. Let's talk SKYDRA in particular, and tell me what it is and how it fits into your training ecosystem exactly.
Sure. So SKYDRA is our proprietary counter UAS simulation software platform. It's run online, and it is a piece that ties all the counter UAS scenarios together. It gives organizations a secure virtual environment to run planning exercises, tabletop simulations, and readiness drills before they're ever in a real world scenario. So if you think of it as a rehearsal and planning space, that's kind of the ideal metaphor for it. You can work through a drone incursion at your facility. You can test your team's response times and how they handle it. You can identify gaps in your procedures and fix them before they actually matter in the real world. So
I was
that
going to say,
capability, yeah,
we're looking at something here, this image. And
yeah.
tell us what this is and how it fits in the SKYDRA.
So this is part of our SKYDRA platform. We were running a scenario uh, in Eastern Europe. And here you're seeing the red dots are all of the red team's incursion, all the different types of drones they're going after this area. And then you see the blue is the deterrence. It's a mixture of radio frequency, jammers, interceptors, and it's a real world scenario. It's something that could actually happen that NATO countries are very concerned about. I believe this is the Donbass region. So this is really where we're at this Swalky gap. So we're really looking at real world scenarios and running those. So we bring those types of scenarios into the conversation and training so that you're not just looking at a hypothetical, you're looking at real world situations where you can play around and figure out what is the best scenario once you get to, so that when you go out into the field, you're better prepared to handle it.
I love that because, man, Danielle, I can't tell you how many, I'll call them tabletop or TTX exercises that I've personally been a part of. And, just to kind of hear things, theoretically and pretend it's not as, like, as they say, the picture paints 1,000 words. And, to have that imagery and, like, all right, here's threats, like, what are we going to do? And on that note, I think Danielle had a really good question. And, I always assume that our audience knows what we're talking about when we use terms, counter UAS, or airspace awareness is the ability to, basically identify that there are things in your airspace and then be able to track them. Well, first of all, detect them, then identify what they are, then track them as needed. And if you have the proper authority to mitigate them, to do something about it, either, cyber RF takeover technology, get them out of the way, land them somewhere, or, laser them out of the sky, whatever that looks like. Danielle had an interesting question, and, it's Danielle, your question is, it's great for Defense Month. I don't know if Danielle's the right person, but I'm going to throw it out there. There's US fighter jets being taken out by cheap drones in Iran. Does counter UAS play into that? And, I think that's more, as I think about it from the US Air Force standpoint, it's like that collaborative combat Air Force thing, CCA, where you have the autonomous drones flying next to like the F-35s to help protect them, drone on drone type stuff. My understanding, and I could be wrong, I know they're working on this, sadly. I think the mitigation they have are like freaking missiles. Like,
Yeah.
I covered a panel, gosh, it was at the AFA Warfare Symposium, and it was about an Israeli, kind of drone event where our pilots got involved in helping to defend. And they were shooting like $1-2 million missiles at little drones. Like that was the solution. Is your training even addressing like let's call it the dogfight air to air type drone, counter drone scenario?
Well, absolutely. It can play those scenarios out. If there's, and in fact, when this plays in real time, that was just a screenshot. You will be able to see something being shot out at a drone that's flying, that maybe is a kamikaze drone that's looking just to come after you. A small little baby drone that's just has a bomb listed attached to it. Has a lot of damage. How do you mitigate that? And, the decision being send this very expensive payload is an indication that we're still learning what the best strategies are for counter UAS. Is that the best strategy? Is that the best strategy moving forward, especially if you overwhelm a counter UAS system and you run out of your ordinances? What's left after that?
Yeah.
That's the big thing you actually take away from using something like SKYDRA.
Wow, that's so cool. I'm learning so much today, Danielle. I'm excited, honestly. I mean, I'm nerding out because I don't, again, I'm not privy to anything like this happening anywhere else. And you guys just launched this SKYDRA in March. Like,
Yeah.
what has, I mean, that's feels like yesterday, right? What has the early response or the feedback you've gotten from organizations that have been able to engage with it? What are they telling you?
So we're really still in the education phase, just like the kind of conversations we're having here today. We're helping organizations understand how and where it fits in their planning structure. When people hear counter UAS, they do tend to think about the execution level, like the technology that they're putting on the ground or in the sky. Part of our role is to reframe that for people. We're starting to see a lot of interest from a wide range of end users, both civil and defense. And it's really changing. This is an evolving phase for us. It's really changing rapidly, and for our end users as well, as everything does in this world right now.
Yeah.
And so just kind of landing home that it's not just training. It's an instrument that that can be used for helping policy, helping framework building, validation of tactics, techniques, and procedures, TTPs, or standing operation procedures, SOPs, and a wide variety of other possibilities. So this is all about shifting the mindset forward, thinking about policy strategy, pre-work, the pre-work that goes into an operation.
Yeah.
And working on operations.
So, question, and just to be crystal clear, so there's no confusion, because we've been talking about your training, a lot of it is live, you go places, you help people, but this SKYDRA is actually deployable worldwide as a SaaS, a subscription-based SaaS, right? Software as a service platform.
Absolutely.
So, so in other words, correct me if I'm wrong, Danielle, when you're doing a live training with a group, not only can you do things out in the field, but you can then take them into a room and run scenarios, maybe before you go out to the field using this. But if a group like Mark's, for example, is like, I want to tap into that and test it, can they do it from their location without you guys having to physically go out there?
No, we don't need to be physically there. And again, some of our courses will be online to that, especially from that thought process scenario. It's when you need to do the more practical, tactical work is when we go in person. So we're developing like the workshop that's going to be an online, that'll be available. But yeah, if you want, or if you just want the software,
Yeah.
we're able to provide that access to the software so you can go in and use it for your team or your group, so you can continuously run scenarios, or as you move to new areas and you want to see what kind of counter UAS and systems and I need for this particular area that we're moving into so I can protect the ground. That's also something that SKYDRA can do, and you don't need training from us if you have that as well. Although I'm partial to our training, you can run right up and grab that SKYDRA.
Okay, that is really, really cool. And honestly, Danielle, like you being on this show today is perfectly timed. I know this is Defense Month, but as you said, this is dual use. And just this morning, the FAA published a notice of public rulemaking for critical infrastructure protection. And, I'm thinking about some of the shows you and I and your team goes to. We'll be going not only to Exponential, but also the Energy Drone Robotics Coalition Summit and that enterprise community. Just saw your team at Drone Responders NACON, their national conference out in Williamsburg. And so, wow, what a great opportunity and what perfect timing as these authorities start following the needs. So to Mark's point, who, is commenting quite a bit, and I love it. Thank you, Mark. Keep it coming. I'm glad you're loving the show and so engaged. The Olympics are coming to the United States in 2028, but you know what? Before that, we've got the 250th birthday. We've got the FIFA World Cup. You've got the FIFA World Cup in Canada, and as does Mexico. So, North America in general, I mean, the timing of this scenario-based, software, SKYDRA simulation training could not have been better timed, quite frankly. So really excited. And let's talk NATO for a second, because, like you and I were talking about earlier, you guys are global. You've made some deep inroads into NATO. My understanding is you just secured a training contract with a NATO defense partner earlier this year. What can you tell us about that?
Well, I think as we've hinted at, we've been able to develop a lot of NATO defense partners over the years. Our established track record of excellence has enabled these contracts, like what we announced in February. So this isn't the first time, but it is another step in the phase of building those relationships. The details are pretty confidential, but what I can say is it involves delivering advanced RPAS training to support operations in remote and extreme environments. It combines our classroom instruction with live flight exercises, so we're taking them out in the field. And the focus is really on preparing operators for real-world defense and security missions, such as emergency response, patrol, surveillance, and reconnaissance.
This is unbelievable, honestly. I can't emphasize the training issue more, honestly. We just here in the US had FAA Drone Safety Day. And, yet we're still getting thousands of sightings near airports and all of these things. So this idea of, hey, I'm an airport, hey, I'm a prison, because I just read a CNN article about they're dropping little fuzzy, little stuffed bunnies into prison yards that are filled with drugs, right? We know all these things are happening. And to have a tool where people can, sit at their desk and essentially war game. Here's my environment. Here's my. So how does it work though? Like, I go to so many shows, Danielle, this, lots of 3D models out there, right? Do you actually work with some of these groups to, like you said, the image, if we could pop that image from SKYDRA back up real quick again from Donbas. When you're working out these real world scenarios, Have you ever used some of your other drones, because you guys have mapping drones right on board and all kinds of, to like 3D model like a facility and an area, and then no kidding, use that as part, or is that something you could do?
That is something we could do, and that's definitely in the next iteration. Right now, we're using a live map. It's two-dimensional, so it
Okay.
enables us to understand where the threats are. So it's like, and right now we're agnostic. So when you select a different type of threat, there's a whole list. I won't get into all the whole list, but you can do everything from large storms to small storms um, to kamikaze drones to FPV drones to optical fiber, you name it. You're enabled to do is that every single one can be edited to the actual dimensions and specs of the actual system that you're trying to train for. And that's both on the blue side and on the red side, the protecting side, the red side. So we're working on a two-dimensional plane right now. The goal is, if we get the right partner, we'll move towards a three-dimensional terrain map of the world so that we can take terrain into consideration. Obviously, there are other scenarios where, wind, weather, that
Yeah.
kind of thing, and ground risk, quite frankly. All of these things come into play when you're doing counter UAS. Is it safe to actually take down a drone? Or if you're an airport, you're not going to be wanting to use an EMF emitter. You're not going to have, that's not going to work very well.
Yeah, well, Danielle, look, my dear buddy is Don Bershaw from True Weather. So if you want anything on weather, my thing is go to Don. He's the weather Don. But I like I said, I was just at GeoIn earlier this week, and this is, you just said, man, if we had a partner in 3D terrain mapping or 3D modeling, and that entire event was your crowd. And what kills me is I walk around, I see space companies there, right? AI companies and all the back end. And 100% people like you, like we got to get these communities together. That's why I go to all these things. People are like, why are you going to a geospatial event? I'm like, because those are the mapping people, and you can't do anything with a drone or a VTOL or almost anything in the world with it. You can't drive your car to the airport without leveraging their technology,
No,
right? And
right. Yep,
so super exciting. We can talk offline, and then as I think about it more, Danielle, too, like put this on your roadmap. It probably is, because you guys are smart. AR, VR, right? So you
mhm,
get that 3D model going of your scenario, and then you've got the goggles on and you're actually in it. Man, that kind of muscle memory. And there's scientific
yeah,
studies that show like you don't need to be in the field, like you can physically feel the realness of it, and especially in that OODA loop training that you guys focus so much on. So really,
absolutely.
really cool. All right, so we are, look, our time is flying. I knew it would. I'm learning so much. It's so cool that you guys have launched the SKYDRA, that you're in deep in the defense community, not just with all the drones that you sell, but now with this training to help people. Um, I know you guys also have some hardware partners and things like that on the counter drone side, which we're not going to really get into, but certainly everybody look at the Volatus website, find them at these various shows. But as you're looking over the next year, right? We're
Mhm.
at the, oh my gosh, let's see, we're in May, so about mid quarter two. Holy shnikes! Uh,
Yeah, time
as
flies.
you look ahead, quarter three, quarter four, ending the year big, strong. What do you see on the horizon for your training program and some of the defense efforts that Volatus is involved in?
On a very high level,
Yeah.
the growth is more robust. Filling in the little bits and pieces, I guess. We really are focused on creating training programs that take you from zero experience to expert. So every part of where that is and wherever you slot in, if you're in the middle ground, you can start there. But we're creating a way to bring we're creating a way to enable users to actually use this technology and use it proficiently. That is what we need in the industry, whether you're in defense or civil. So when you're looking at the training roadmap, that is what we're looking at. We're looking at it programmatically. We're looking at the user's journey, the student's journey, and how do we take them from that beginner phase all the way through to being the top of their game. With that said, for training and simulation, I'm looking forward to additional adaptations for SKYDRA. I'm looking toward rapid deployment and flexibility there, but we are seeing taking a long view, we're seeing a world that where counter UAS isn't treated as some kind of side conversation. It's treated as a requirement, kind of like cybersecurity is today.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
And that's kind of that really was my next question. 2 to 3 years from now, if programs like what you're putting out aren't really adopted, what does the world look like?
A very scary place.
Yeah. I mean, because what we don't want is reckless cowboys out there shooting stuff out of the sky either. Right.
Yeah.
So we're worried about as we call them, I call them the 4 C's now, the careless, clueless, the clueless, careless, what are the 3 C's? Clueless, careless. I say, criminal. Thank you. Criminal. Of course, the cop would know that. The criminal, and now I added the 4th one, combatant. Right.
Yeah.
We're all worried about them, but and of course the drone pilots themselves, they're equally worried about people that have authority that abuse that, or that don't know how to use it properly, that take their drones out of the sky when they didn't need to be taken out of the sky. Right. So this is why everybody needs to be done. Mark wasn't a cop. I'm sorry. He was like San Diego Harbor Police. Oh, Harbor Maritime. So very cool. Anyway, so yeah, Eddie. So how do people that are listening, Danielle, learn more about Volatus Academy or get a look at SKYDRA? Like, where do they go for that?
So I would go to volatusaerospace.com and do a request. Say, I saw a Dawn of Autonomy and I'd like to learn more about your SKYDRA program, and our team will reach out to you right away. You can also go to volatusacademy.ca if you're in Canada, or volatusacademy-us.com if you're in the US, to poke around our defense. And you can also request a consult with our team, and we can work with you on whether that's a SKYDRA simulation, or whether that is a bespoke course, or whether some other form of online training or virtual training.
Very good. And our dear friend and super fan, Mark Gagne from the Nevada test site, has just popped up that he likes the 4 C's, adding that to basically his lexicon. So, hey, Mark, I hope I see you next week, buddy. I have some scholarships left for Law Tech Connect. And by the way, let me throw that out there while we're rounding this out. Danielle's been talking about education and training this the whole time, almost. And I want to say, at Exponential next week, Volatus has always been a supporter and is again of our annual Law Tech Connect workshop at Exponential. It's going to be Wednesday and Thursday this year, embedded in the main event. If you've got a full or VIP pass, come on down. You can actually attend for free. If you don't, and you want to come, I do still have a handful of scholarships. Email me at info@p3techconsulting.com and we will hook you up, but you got to do it soon. So hope to see some of you there. But Danielle, I'm going to cede the floor to you for the last minute here to please, make any concluding remarks. And if I missed anything you wanted to talk about, now's your time. Otherwise, your deep thoughts to end the show.
Counter UAS isn't just an option anymore. It needs to be part of our flight strategy and operations. This isn't just a defense conversation. It is an air safety awareness conversation, and everyone needs to be part of it. Just like Don said, we're dealing with pilots who are getting interfered with, and then we're dealing with drones that go in places that they don't belong because they're either clueless, careless, criminal, or combatants. So we need to be on the lookout and understand how and what we can do via authority. So if you want to learn more about that, join our counter UAS workshop. What legal if you're in Canada, and stay tuned to Volatus Academy us.com for our US version in the future.
All right, very good. Well, once again, Danielle, thank you so much for joining us on the show today. You've given us our own education here about all the things that Volatus has been doing in the defense space, especially for counter UAS training and the SKYDRA simulation software. So really, really cool. Thank you for sponsoring this month dedicated to defense tech. And looking forward to seeing you, hopefully, and if not you, some of the team around these various shows. Go ahead in the soft week at the end of the month too, Special Ops Forces. So that's always an awesome show. Everybody, that's all she wrote for now. We've got an incredible show right dropped in the middle of Exponential. So if you don't have time, can you run the floor, dial in and watch it on demand. It's Grand Sky. And not only is it Tom Sawyer from Grand Sky, but it's Lieutenant Colonel Matthew Lineberry from the United States Air Force together with Tom. It's going to be an amazing show about some of the stuff they're doing together. So that's all she wrote for now. We are out here.